Okay, so welcome to class 2. You can see our agenda. We're going to talk about doing well on final projects, voting on case studies, and the future of blockchain. For starters, we're just going to do some housekeeping. If you open up the participants box, you'll see that most students have their team number followed by a dash of 1 or 9. So please hit the rename and put in your team number. If you don't have a team, put in a 0. And if you want me to chat with you during class, put in a 1. And it's just asking you like your opinions on things. It's not going to be like a quiz question. Or a 9 if you don't want me to chat with you. This is going to be a class where we will be grading based on participation. So a 1 allows you to get participation by talking and having your video on. If you prefer not to do that, just make sure that you're extra active in the chat room. So everyone's going to have, there's going to be about 15 opportunities to participate in class today. So you can have an opportunity. And I'm muting the open mics. So if anyone's got an open mic, if you could self-mute. And also to make sure that everyone knows all the buttons, could you all raise your hand and keep your hands up? And if you don't know where that button is, just open up your mic and ask me. So Anna, if you could change your formatting to make it team 11-1 or 9, Anna. Carrie Joy, if you could do the same. And anyone that doesn't have a team, put a 0 in front of your name. So it looks like Thorsten doesn't have a team unless you just change your rename. And Carrie Joy, we don't see a team for you. Daniel, okay, so Daniel's on team 0. So Daniel needs a team. So if we can do this right now. So we've got Daniel. Anna, can you just change the formatting to make it team 11-1-Anna so that the sorting goes by alphabetical? And Carrie Joy, if you can put in your team number and a -1-9. So it looks like, and Thorsten, we don't know your status. If you could let us know if you're on a team or not. So it looks like, okay, so Daniel needs a team. Hector, can you change your formatting to be team 1-9?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. It just allows the sorting to go easier. Or just if you could tell us if you want a 1 or a 9 after your team 11. So you can put your hands down. Could you click yes if you would be willing or looking for a new team member? We need to find Daniel a home. So just click the yes button. And if Daniel, if we can't find you someone here, we'll just assign you to a group.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. So I'm going to clear all. Okay, so again, one last moment here. Click yes if you would be willing to take Daniel onto your team. Oh, so we've got Carrie Jo needs a team and Daniel. So Carrie Jo and Daniel, would you both open up your mics and tell me if you'd be willing to be your own team?
Hi, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So why don't we make you team 0 just to keep things easy?
Okay, cool.
Let me just, so Carrie, if you would just put in team 0. Clement, if you tell us what your team number is, followed by a 1 or a 9. Okay, so the team projects, so we're done with this section. Let's keep moving. The team projects, everyone's going to be doing a 5 to 10 minute video that's going to be on YouTube or however you want to record it. Be prepared to play it in class. However, we might not have enough time to have it played, but be prepared. It's going to be a 3-hour class, so we might actually be able to do it. Everyone, however, is going to be doing their 90-second pitch in class. And if I'm looking at this correctly, we only have about 9 or 10 teams. So everyone's going to be doing their 90-second pitch. After that, we're going to be rolling into the 5 to 10 minute videos. So get comfortable on Zoom, and you can come into the Zoom class anytime you want using the share function, which is at the bottom. Actually, it looks like a little green suitcase. When you click on that, that allows you to share your screen so that we can look at your YouTube video. When you click the share screen, you'll see on the bottom left, before you click yes, there are 2 little very important boxes which will hook up the audio to your video. So I encourage you to practice share screen before we actually do the final so you can get that together. So again, everyone does their 90-second pitch. You don't need PowerPoints. You're welcome to have them if you want. After everyone does a 90-second pitch, then we're just going to be going down the line having you play your 5 to 10 minute videos. And raise your hand if you have any questions about how the next class is going to go. Or you can put something into the chat. Okay, so it looks like we're ready to go. So before we get into the case studies, I put in a few, oh, by the way, anyone who has a 1, I'm going to be chatting with you just for your opinions on anything that comes up in class on these slides. A 9, I will not be talking to you, but this class I'm going to be grading on class participation. So if you have a 9, I'm not going to call on you. But if you have something to say, please put it in the chat, and I will be looking at the chat. So if you have your video camera on and a 1 in your name, you're probably going to get all the points today. But everyone has an equal opportunity to get points, but since there's a second form of communication, you're going to have a better probability of getting an A in this class, meaning sector. Anyone who has a 9, please make sure that you make at least 5 decent comments into the chat room. So raise your hand or go into the chat room if there's any confusion about that, because I want the people who have 9s in front of their name to have equal opportunity to do well today. Okay, let's keep going. To the people that have 1s in front of their name, I actually put some old articles in Module 4. So one of them were 9 startups that are going to be the next big thing in 2016. There was a 7 predictions that you're going to be seeing in 2018. Then there were 10 crypto predictions for 2018. Raise your hand if you'd like to share with me why you think I intentionally put in articles that were up to 3 years old. Marianne, you're on the air. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hi.
So I'm thinking that maybe you put those in there so that we can see like the progression, because a lot of the older articles were about predictions, and so where they expect the blockchain industry, specifically in the startup world, to head. And so now that we're in 2019, maybe it was just to contrast and see, like, for instance, the startups. Personally, I didn't know any of those startups that were from like 2016. I honestly don't even know if they're still around. So I think it was maybe just to see the contrast and see where we are as far as predictions go and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. By looking at old information, it allows us to have the benefit of hindsight, for one. The other is, as Marianne says, those startups, they might not be around anymore. But the other one is that I want to remove the feeling of buying into the hype that's around blockchain. But I really want you to be able to analyze, is this a good project or not, without feeling that, oh, I'm missing out on something, I don't understand enough about the technology, I'm behind. Because a lot of people are just making stuff up. And I want you to have healthy skepticism on what you look at. And a lot of these articles were written that every one of these things are going to become a unicorn. And when I looked back at all these predictions, I didn't see any of them that had come true, which is why I'll continue to have these up here, because I really want you to not get sucked in by all the hype. You know, blockchain's good, but I think it's going to end up being one of these sort of dull back officey things like email. I mean, email is just something that's part of our day, but when email first came out, people said it was going to shut down the post office. My father was actually a printer at the time, and he was afraid that they were going to go bankrupt because they were going to stop using paper. And that never really happened. So I intentionally did that on purpose. And I see Alexander's hand is up, and then after that, Frederick. Alexander, what's on your mind?
Yeah. So I think that it's very similar to some extent to the dot-com bubble. That basically you have, and I even see it on my own LinkedIn from friends and all, that they basically build companies on on a day-to-day basis because blockchain somehow enables them to. But I think it was very interesting what the MIT fellow from the video said yesterday, that a lot of them are not actually creating value, and they just gain a lot of traction and attention because they are simply on the blockchain. So I think for us it's very important to really identify which of these startups are actually bringing value and could be accepted by society.
Good point. I actually bought all the available blockchain stocks that were out there about a year and a half ago, and they're all in a loss right now. Actually, they're like all of them but one are down about 95%. I only bought a few $100s of them, except one. I did put a bunch of money in, and it did go up 30% last year, but in this recent crash, it's basically slightly below break even right now. And one stock, I wasn't able to buy it. It was actually an iced tea company in Long Island, New York, and they put blockchain in their name, and their stock totally popped the next day. But they just make iced tea, so it's a bit of a joke. I'm going to do a quick poll. Someone put in it's a comment, and I would like everyone to vote. This is also another opportunity to gain points, so please participate in this poll. Should we ban blockchain applications until good government regulations can be established? This was actually a comment, and I'd like to get a poll on this. Should we ban blockchain applications until we get good government regulations? Yes or no? So we have 15 seconds left. All right, let's see how we did. Okay, so 85% of people said no. Now, 7 people said yes. Of those 7 people, please raise your hand if you'd be willing to share with us what your thought process is. So please raise your hand because we would like to hear the counterpoint of view. And if not, please put into the chat room. John Daly, welcome to the show. Tell us what you're thinking.
I think the ban is somewhat of a strong word that might have a negative association with it. Mm-hmm. But I think that there's a scenario that if you let it go unchecked, then you have like multi-dimensional chains getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And at one point that they're not going to be able to coexist with one another. I sort of touch on this point about what's wrong with blockchain. I think the standardization is really important. I guess like a simple analogy would be like if you let 50 different people invent their own language and then all of a sudden you try and integrate together, like the overhead cost of trying to understand each other, not being able to undo what has already been done, I think could be a huge issue for the progress of it as a general purpose technology.
Thank you. These are good points. From my limited exposure to the government, I've actually testified in front of the SEC during the Bernie Madoff scandal, like 9 hours of testimony. And what I learned about government agencies, a lot of the really good people are working at Goldman Sachs. So that's the one thing that you get. The government also typically will allow accredited investors who have over $1 million in investable assets to get burned on their own because they think that they can analyze their own investments. Basically, once enough people have been burned, that's when they will step in. That's also a bit of a cover for the fact that they don't really understand it. So they let it go for a while on their own, trying to kind of do like a laissez-faire. And then when people start getting cheated, like with Bitcoin, like when the small mom and pops start to get taken advantage of and the Ponzi schemes pop up, that's when they tend to get involved. But from my limited perspective, a lot of government agencies don't understand this enough to regulate it, and they would rather make no regulation than make a bad regulation and have to reverse it. Again, that's just one opinion. Other people are more than welcome to have a counter opinion, and please raise your hand if you do. Diego, what do you think? And thank you, John, for your comments.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to, I mean, I answer no, but then on the other hand, I agree that, for example, talking specifically about ICOs, that started to get a little out of control and you start to see a lot of people doing fraud. So I do believe at certain point regulations have to step in. I do agree that regulations usually are the ones that push innovation because they really have a very hard time trying to keep up. But when you are affecting people now with fraud and doing stuff that it's not ethical or it's not good, that's when regulations in a way they need to step up.
Great, thank you. And if we have time today, I'm going to show you how to detect blockchain scams. If not, I'll do that in class 3. Lydia, what do you think?
Yeah, I voted for no because, like you said, well, and governments are too slow. It's probably not a good idea to regulate blockchain from the beginning. They need to try blockchain in many industries and maybe then start regulating in sort of industries or parts that are not working as well and that well. And yeah, I don't know. I think at the beginning it shouldn't be regulated or banned.
Okay, thank you. Also, when I was living in China, that was right, I moved there right after they banned ICOs. China loves blockchain. They love almost everything about it. And the reason that they banned it was that there were so many scams and they didn't know what to do with it. So they just stopped the whole thing. But I actually got sucked into a scam, meaning people were saying I was working for them when I wasn't. That's in the last slide deck. And they ended up just moving to Singapore to continue to do the thing. But they're going to open it back up once they get a handle on it. But basically, China didn't want to be known as the haven to so many scams, which is why they stopped it. But a lot of people think it's weird that China bans ICOs, but they're very hot and heavy on blockchain. And it's just because they didn't know what to do with it, from what I learned. But I know plenty of people, I know one guy especially, who's from a wealthy family with government connections, who has a gambling website in blockchain with tokens, and he's just waiting for the government to change their mind and make it legal, then he's just gonna turn it back on again. And it's gonna allow you to, well, pretty much gamble on anything that you want, and to buy tokens on professional athletes so that you can sponsor them. Because in some countries, you actually have to be wealthy to get your trainers. You're not just given money by someone. So they want to sell tokens on athletes. And Carrie Joy, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I actually wanted to challenge the argument of the government being slow. I think that just as I commented above before, I think that for regulation to happen, you need to see how society interacts with this technology, right? So once this starts happening, we've seen how many countries, for example, I'd like to mention Mexico, is starting to have regulation on technologies like blockchain, on cryptocurrencies and how it interacts with the market and everything. But governments need to see how it interacts with people. Once they do, this is possible. If they don't, they're just basing everything on assumptions, and then everything fails and reforms become untrustworthy, if I can make myself clear.
I love it. Thank you. I love counter arguments because I want everyone to have an opinion and be able to think about things and have different opinions. So it's completely encouraged. So I appreciate that. So now let's move on to actual case studies. So again, this is just a quickie slide that we went through last time. This is how to do well on your final project. What's the problem, the solution? Keep it simple. Is this a need versus a nice to have? How do you make money? You don't need to go crazy on that because some of your ideas may be for large corporations or governments where it just saves money. It's not an actual revenue stream. How do you scale it if you can? Do the decision path, and then everyone's going to be doing their 90-second pitch. This is the blockchain decision path that we will be using for grading, which basically we really want to make sure that you need blockchain. Same thing for a token. I'd encourage you not to try to use a token unless you need that token to do something that money can't do. And one of the case studies here is going to show that example. So if you can do it, great. That is huge if you can figure that out. And there are possibilities, but they're rare. I just don't want you to use a token for the sake of using a token. So we're going to start with some current case studies. So this is actually in the news as of the other day, January 17th, where SAP is going to be using blockchain to stop counterfeit drugs. And the basic idea is that drugs get returned to the wholesaler if they don't get used. And there's about $7 billion worth of that. Now, what they don't want to do is give you credit by sending back counterfeit drugs or the potential of being able to resell those drugs if they've been tampered with. So right now, by 2020, they're looking at 20% of healthcare companies are going to be going beyond pilots. But this is actually a pilot right now. And they're going to be going beyond the supply chain, going into operations management and patient ID. So pharma is actually kind of all over blockchain. But here are the goals that SAP is doing, that they're also looking to transmit patient data pretty quickly. So for example, you might be able to get insurance paid for, co-pays paid for quicker by having them on the blockchain because everyone's going to be talking to each other. The other is there's a compliance standard with the government, and this is where I think the government gives you a lot of opportunities. They're looking for, the government wants a unique identification of medicinal products. And so you need drugs to be identified anywhere in the world. Think of a QR code that anyone could use on any drug. If this doesn't exist, this is an opportunity in blockchain for you to make something that would create, that would be in compliance with government regulations. So when the government comes down with a new rule, you might be able to hop on it. Again, enabling compliance with the U.S. Drug Chain Security Act, that just came out in November. Again, having the government create a regulation could give you a reason to create a startup. Might not be the most thrilling startup, but it could be an interesting one. So now what I'm going to ask you to vote on is using blockchain to track drugs being returned. Is that a good use of blockchain? Yes or no? Do you think this is a good use of blockchain by using it to track unused drugs to make sure that they're not counterfeit? So 15 seconds and we'll share the results. Okay, let's see how we did. Wow, 96%. That's a pretty big number. And we have 2 people that disagreed. So they agree, that's pretty obvious, but of the 2 people that said no, would you be willing to raise your hand or go into the chat and just share with us what your thought process is, why it's not a good idea? Okay, so I see elite. Yes, I don't see a reason why it's not. Any hands are popping to the chat why you think it's not a great idea? Okay, Charlie, what are you thinking? How are you?
Good. I voted yes, but thinking about it, one bad thing is how blockchain's immutable. So if a mistake in data entry or something happens, you'd have people's health records with a error in it that I'm not sure how you would remedy that, or you have to build that into the system to deal with a human error.
Charlie brings up a really good point, and this will lead us to a company called Accenture. And Accenture has a appendable blockchain. And within the optional reading in Canvas, if you really dug down into the buried part of it, there's actually a video from Accenture on how it works. And very simply what they do is that they take, you have your two blocks and they're linked by the hash. So you have this block is verified, but it's linked to the hash of the other block. So they're together. So if you try to change one, it's going to break it. But what Accenture has done is that they unlock the block, allow you to change the data, like say, okay, Charlie's name is really Charles, not Charlie, or Charlie's actually alive and not dead, or something really important. And so they change the data, put it back in, and then they relock it. So Accenture has done that, and the reason for it is humans make mistakes, like Charlie just said. Maybe the QR code had a spot of mud on it and said this stuff is bad, or said this stuff is good when it was the opposite. Or maybe a court made a ruling and said, hey, you've got stuff on a public blockchain that's wrong. For example, I'm Michael McCarthy in Boston. There's another Michael McCarthy in Boston that murdered a 2-year-old named Baby Jane Doe, I think 2-3 years ago. And someone in China Googled me and in a speech I was giving said, hey, are you a murderer? And I'm like, what? And I thought, oh yeah, that meth guy who like killed his girlfriend's baby. So yeah, that's something that I would love to have changed. So Charlie, thank you for bringing that up. Kung Fong, your hand is up. What are you thinking? Welcome.
Thank you. It's actually with regards to what Charlie said. So for me, blockchain is usually unchangeable, and that's the appeal of it, for the honesty, for the transparency. So for me, if there was a mistake made, then it's similar to the example you gave previously about the book adding an extra comma. It just has to be changed across all records, and it's recorded that a mistake was made. Admittedly, not great for the person that recorded it, but at least it means that, you know, if something had happened, it's transparent, it's actually updated and corrected it. It's still not saying, you know, you changed the record, because the whole point of blockchain and transparency for me is important. You know, the Accenture thing, like the idea of it, but isn't that just changing this transparency appeal as well?
So Kung Fong is making a really interesting point that if you have an appendable blockchain, that really takes away really one of the pillars of the reason that it existed. That you no longer have that etched in stone. It's more like you've got an eraser for that stone. So now anyone can start to doubt the data, like, hey, was that changed? And that can reduce some of the trust. And she's making an interesting alternative, you know, hey, we spelled your name wrong, and here's the correction, but here's the mistake, here's the comment, here's the correction. So here's the paper trail, which could be a good solution, unless there would be something like, oh, Michael went to jail because he beats his dog. Oh, sorry, no, wrong Michael. We're going to fix that. No, Michael's nice to dogs. Well, can you really unsee that when you've already gotten the idea that I'm a dog herder? And now someone said, no, never mind that. So it's subtle. I don't know the answer to it, but I do think that having an appendable blockchain really gets the purists seriously upset, because it really takes away one of the big reasons why it was made. It also, if someone wants to do the fake news thing, like, oh yeah, you know, immutable, schmutable, they changed it, we'll never know. So I think it can really allow people to throw doubt into the trust part. So I think I think there's more downside than upside. However, let's do another quick vote while we're chatting about it. So here comes the question. Should we have a blockchain that you can append for mistakes? Yes. Or no, you can't change it. You can add on to it the mistakes. So again, I'll say it again. Do you want to have a blockchain where you can actually go in and edit and change a mistake? Or no, you can't change it and erase it. You have to add on to it so you can see the mistake and the correction. So again, yes means you can go in there and change something and we don't know what you did. Or no, we have to see the mistake and the correction. 5 more seconds. Let's share this. Okay, so we have 5 people yes, then we have a no, we have 85% no, and 2 people have C. So the people that said C, could you raise your hand so we could understand what your thought process is? I see a little something in the chat. I just want to make sure that you get heard. Sunny, go ahead.
I voted for no just because the reason is if you cannot see the mistake and you can simply go and edit it, then it doesn't really solve the purpose of blockchain. It doesn't give you that much of security. And if it is that easy to change something without noticing or even having the solid proof, it makes it the same as all other technologies we have. If I understood the question correct.
Yeah, good point. Valentina.
Yeah, hi. So I voted for no for the same reasons of Sunny. Like it's not, it doesn't solve the purpose of blockchain anymore. If we do that at the same time, though, last time you gave an example to us. For example, if you spell my name wrong, and then you have to correct it, but you have to you can see everything, right? You can see that you spelled it wrong and you corrected it. So I don't know. At the same time, that might not look good. For example, maybe there are some examples that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Marianne, what are you thinking?
So I voted for no as well because, as mentioned earlier, that's one of the joys of blockchain is the transparency that you can't change it. My only concern, it was sort of I guess 50-50 for me, because my only concern would be, yes, we can add an extra block to the blockchain, but the amount of energy that's going to consume, if we are able to amend it, I don't know if that would maybe aid in the amount of energy and lower the amount of energy versus adding another blockchain, because people can be careless sometimes. So if we have a lot of mistakes, I'm just concerned as to how much energy adding these additional blockchains on would cause.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy flying out the window with this stuff. True. Luis, what are you thinking?
Yes, hi. I also voted for no, and I do agree with everything that is being said. It comes down blockchain is about trustworthiness in the system, but it also made me think of one concern that is actually the accountability of that mistake and why was it done. And we as humans, we tend to maybe not take accountability for our mistakes. So I guess that made me think whoever is accountable for that mistake, or why isn't it corrected, or what was the purpose of it, or was it just a mistake, or how deep can it go?
You make an interesting point that what if we could rate the quality of our miners and verifiers? Kind of like when you buy a mattress or underwear, they have a little sticker in there that says inspected by, John or Joan, so you know who was actually there. What if you had someone's name that, hey, I actually verified this block and it was wrong. So now my rating of being a 5-star miner verifier might get dropped, and maybe that would allow me to get fired because I make too many mistakes. Or maybe if I get a high rating, I could get more money. So you kind of bring up another idea for a startup of doing a miner rating system that some people would have a higher pay grade because they have higher quality. again, I just throw out idea. If you like it, make a start.
Yeah, that's very interesting because it would bring down like the trust part of the blockchain also to the human side. Yeah.
Well, with miners, you're having the human side in there, and you might be able to save a little bit of electricity if you have someone who knows what they're doing very quickly versus someone who makes a mistake and uses more juice to fix it, and then maybe they screwed that up and they had to fix it again. So there might be some minor things in there. Or maybe someone's so good at it, you give them higher level of permission where maybe only 2 people need to verify instead of 4 people because they're 5-star. So there could be some energy usage, energy savings by rating the quality of your miners. And again, that just popped in my head. So take it if you like it. And Frederick, what's on your mind?
Hi. I actually voted yes because I think with the transparency there comes a lot of good, and it's the important of what makes blockchain what it is today. But I also think people forget in the world we live in, there's a lot of people who target others in terms of damaging reputation, such that you said that suddenly you popped up by being a child murderer by somebody with similar name. And I think if these things cannot be unseen, it can create a lot of damaging reputation for somebody who has never been part of what they have been accused of.
Thank you. Charlie, what's on your mind?
So how, if we can add mistakes, like how would it be controlled or verified that I'm actually correcting a mistake? Like if I was able to go into blockchain and say, that guy didn't buy Bitcoin, I bought the Bitcoin, give me the Bitcoin. How would you be able to control that kind of a thing? So I could see it working on like private blockchains where in the healthcare example, only certain whatever authority in the healthcare sector that hospitals agree giving that power to, that's okay. But in a public blockchain, who has the authority to verify mistakes to make any of that okay? Whatever form of mistake correction you have.
Good point. You're getting a little bit into the Wild West here. I mean, the example I'm giving is something personal that, you know, I'm alive versus dead, or I'm honest versus dishonest, and maybe I can prove that because the court, you know, I could get a court document or something like that on a private blockchain. But on the public one, yeah, who do you call when the Bitcoin gets sent to the wrong person or someone just dings it out of your account? Good point. You have to actually contact those miners, and it gets messy. It's very hard to find these people. There's a trust issue. That's the other one, which is why I think Bitcoin has some trouble, that a lot of people don't understand it. And once you've made a mistake, like when I first started working for the Chinese, they paid me in Ether. And I had to open up a Coinbase account. I got a QR code. I sent them the thing. And I was like, I hope I sent them the right QR code. Like what if I sent it the wrong one? And I was wrong. And they sent it to Charlie. Well, Charlie's not going to send the 5,000 back. And I call up China. I'm like, hey, sent it to the wrong place. Well, they still want me to work. And I sent it the wrong QR code. But how do I fix it? Now I don't really want to give them $5,000 worth of work if I don't get the money, and I don't want to pay that much of a mistake for a bad QR code. So yeah, it gets messy really fast. It gets messy super fast. Alex, what's on your mind?
You know, I would just wanted to get your opinion on something quick, Michael. I had put it in the chat. We keep talking about having a verifier for all this information, which is obviously very important. But when it comes to certain kinds of information, who exactly will be the verifier? So for a doctor, for example, when he puts in information for medical records of his patient, who exactly is there in a hierarchy that can therefore, you know, verify that information is correct or incorrect? I mean, who can verify some of this very important information that nobody knows the answer to?
Well, typically we can get some guidance from who's doing verifying now. So let's say that Alex wants to buy a house, and I'm the mortgage company, and I need to verify his income. So, I mean, I want Alex to get the house because I want the fees. I want the interest off that loan for 30 years. So I want him to get the house. I want to make sure that he can pay for the house, but I have to verify the income. So where do I go? So I say, okay, let's go to Alex's HR department and get a tax form. And I'm going to believe that because they don't have any incentive to lie. So what we're looking for is who is going to tell me the truth and who doesn't care one way or the other, doesn't have an incentive to lie to me or tell me the truth. And I just give them some money like, hey, is he making 50 grand or not? Yes or no? And you don't really care. So I think it kind of comes down to who has a natural incentive. Another thing you could look at would be, just strangers that would be saying, okay, look, my job is to look at social security numbers and tax returns. And I just match up his social security number said last year on his 1099 that he made 50 grand, yes or no, and you're going to pay me $1 to say yes or no to that. So that might be the way to do it. But again, it's the Wild West. What I find when I do deals is try to make people naturally incentivized to do the right thing. And I never expect people to honor a contract that they don't want to honor. That's just general life advice. If someone doesn't want to honor the contract, they will get out of it. So very quickly, the last two people before we go to the next case study, Kum Fong and then Amato. Kum, what are you thinking?
Basically, I was one of the ones focused on C. Even though I talked about the transparency thing, I think things do depend in terms of your ability to change things. It should be minor things like adding, I don't know, a hyphen in between your name or changing Charlie to Charles or something like that. It's really simple. It's a genuine mistake. It's okay. I also believe that we are talking about a topic. I do agree with the verifying, but we are all human beings, and just because we're using blockchain and it's supposed to be transparent doesn't mean that we shouldn't check what we're entering onto the system in the first place. We already have procedures at present when we're inputting medical records where you have someone entering and someone just checking and verifying. There is a profession. So I agree there is concern about the accuracy of stuff, but I don't think it's as bad as it might sound, because there are actual real procedures of checking what's going in there. Even when we're going shopping or buying something, we can verify it. I mean, if you use certain bank accounts, before you send a payment through, you could always just, the QR code you said, you could just check, we get messages from people and we accept it just to say, yes, I do know that person. I do want that person to send me money, or et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think it's completely as bad as it sounds. That's my opinion.
Good point, although for some reason it reminds me that Charles MGH is one of the more famous hospitals in Boston, and they had an issue where they were amputating someone's leg and they cut the wrong leg off. And now I think you need 2 or 3 people to actually put your signature on the leg that you're cutting. Super gross, but it kind of comes down to like the very, cut off the black leg, not the white healthy leg. But whatever, yeah, that can be an issue.
Yes. With that one, in that particular example, I think before you even put the patient into, the state where you can actually operate on them, we confirm with them what operation you're doing, what limb you're working on, and then you also actually confirm that with the medical staff in the operation room. So that is how people verify it. They don't just one doctor makes all the decisions. They do actually verify it with the other people in the team that understand what's happening in the operation as well, to actually prevent that from happening.
Yeah, when you go to the doctor now, do they ask you your birthday like 10 or 12 times? Yeah. I keep saying to them, like, I've never gotten a birthday card from you people. Like, everyone knows my birthday. But anyhow, I live with that resentment. Amato, last comment before we move to the next case study.
My worry was basically when it's relating to transparency and to people's information, and the uncertainty that we now have with how our data is used, just because we don't understand many things. And we know that Facebook is selling our data. We know that all of this is going on around our personal information. How is it that we're going to trust a system that is going to have all of our information in there, like every single detail from my security social security number to my history in health. I know it's supposed to be protected. My worry is that people are not going to really very easily buy into the idea of having it all there for people to have access or hack at some point. So building this trust towards people, I think that's one of the biggest challenges that might happen after this, if we're looking for this transparency or for people to trust the system.
Yes, agreed. So we're going to move to the next case study. So Anna, Laura, Charlie, if you want to put your comments in the chat, you're welcome to do that. So the next case study, again, you notice that this is current, January 16. Ford Motor Company is going to be doing a blockchain project with IBM to do ethical sourcing of cobalt. You'll see on the bottom right, if you want to take a screenshot, this is the link to the actual article. It's pretty short, about a 5-minute read. And I actually contacted the people who are doing this. Here's the problem, that there is child labor in the Congo where most of the cobalt is being mined, about 60% of the world's supply. And one car battery needs 20 pounds of it. Laptop needs an ounce. And by 2026, we're looking at 800% growth. So we might be feeding a child labor society in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, how do we fix that? So here's the Congo. It's in blue. It's right in the middle. Some, not all, of the mines are using child labor. Over half of the world's supply is coming from here. 20% of the mines are by small local producers, and this is where they run into the child issue. 80% are industrial mines. However, if someone's buying a Tesla, they probably don't want to have a battery that was mined by a child. So this is actually a potential PR nightmare. So here are the challenges that you're actually going to be having creating the blockchain. Is you have to monitor these informal mines. Now, do they have an internet connection? Do they even understand how to put their information on the blockchain? And how are you going to transmit it if you're in the middle of the Congo? I don't know what the internet connectivity is, or if these people have smartphones. And even then, how do you know if it's true? So this comes back to the core issue of, hey, it's great when it's on the blockchain, but how do you know that it's right to get it on in the first place? And this article actually doesn't answer that. However, this is a blockchain partnership with some big players, Ford Motor Company, IBM, and RCS Global. Now, these people were in the article. Manish Chawla from IBM, I connected with him on LinkedIn and asked him to be a guest speaker in our lecture series next semester. He agreed. And then Nicholas Garrett, he runs RCS. So he's the one that's actually doing the blockchain. He connected with me as well. And I emailed the dean at Hult and said, can I invite you all to be a part of my blockchain guest series lecture? And I haven't gotten a yes or no back on that one. But if there's interest, it's going to be free. It's voluntary. It will be recorded. You already have 23 interviews on YouTube. If you keep that link, I'm going to be adding these interviews to that, but it can also be fun to be a part of the live class so you can actually talk to these guys directly. And again, here's your big problem. This is actually children in the Congo mining cobalt. And you know, what do you do with this? But again, the blockchain is supposed to track it from the mine to the smelters. So they're going to be tracking it with a company called LG Chem. All the way to it goes to the battery plant in South Korea and then comes to Ford in the United States. So once it gets on the blockchain, then the audit trail becomes really clear. But again, you have an issue. Now the auditor here, the person that's going to be verifying is going to be this person, Nicholas Garrett, RCS Global. They're actually going to be the validator because that is the service that they provide in New York City. So again, this is what Garrett is saying, that, you know, as the validator, we're going to bring trust and responsibility to the supply chain. And this is what he gets paid for. So he wants to make sure that he's doing good work so that he can get referrals and grow his business. He doesn't want to find out that some child labor cobalt got into the blockchain that he was verifying. It would hurt his business. So he has a reason to do a good job. Traditionally, all these miners are subject to third-party audits, but again, it's the Congo. If you read the article, they say it's a relatively lawless place. I don't know. All I know is what the article is saying. So maybe there's some bribery going on, or people just say, yeah, it's fine. And Chawla from IBM, very good little blurb here, the world's first mineral supply chain. If this works, it goes into other minerals that you can use. But really what they're also trying to do is, you see in the bottom here, the OECD, again, is another government regulatory agency that's trying to have standards. And this is where we can have opportunity to say, hey, the government or regulatory bodies are saying we need to have these standards. Using blockchain would give you a good reason to create that blockchain and get customers because they want to comply. So here are some of the challenges, and I'd like you to raise your hand or go into the chat and talk to me about some of the challenges that you think are here. You know, verifying where the minerals are coming from. What if you start mixing these chemicals? So let's hear from the studio audience. Alexander, what do you think?
I want to put a different perspective on this, which not really has to do with the human rights implication of you using this. I'm wondering if we make cobalt a 100% ethical product in a way, will electric cars actually be feasible anymore? I think something that is not considered is what are the cost implications of basically changing the cobalt industry as a whole. Will it actually have a larger impact that electric cars or companies producing electric cars are simply not an attractive business proposition anymore financially?
You make an interesting point. If we go back to the data that said that 80% of cobalt is from industrial mines, that is regulated, it's the 20% of the smaller mines that have the child labor. Let's just assume that that's correct information. If that was flipped, then Alexander has a point that it might be too expensive to verify all this, and therefore you're not going to be able to get your car batteries. What do you do then? But if you flip it back to where the data is correct as reported, assuming that it is, you might be able to say we're only going to use industrial mines. And if you're a smaller mine with child labor, we're not going to let you be part of the supply chain unless you sell your mine to an industrial miner or allow yourselves to be regulated by them who we've pre-approved. So that might be a way around it. But Alexander makes a point that if this is really the Wild West, it might be too expensive to clean it up. German, what are you thinking?
Well, I was also thinking like Alex. There is a huge amount of contamination around the world just because of mining. And I think this is one of the best ideas we can have with blockchain. The thing is like with blockchain, we'll help with the elimination of child labor and bad conditions of any worker around the world. And well, I was thinking as well as him, because probably the system is going to collapse when people will notice the conditions of how these minerals are produced, you know. For example, whenever you have, let's talk about not only about cobalt, but also lithium. How are they producing lithium around the world? And when producing lithium is super contaminant. So I think this is the chance also to blockchain come up with a protection of the environment and all of this, you know. So I believe when people notice right away, how do we get to the electric energy with cars or bikes or whatever, then probably there's going to be a huge problem because of contamination and child labor and all these working conditions.
Great, thank you. So going forward, I love all this participation and the hands going up so that we can have time for everyone. If you could make sure that your comments are under 2 minutes long, and if someone says your comment, just lower your hand because there's going to be lots of opportunities. But this is all really good stuff. I love it all. Luis, what are you thinking?
Yes, going back to the 80-20%, that 20% that are self-employed minors, how do you verify which ones did use child labor and which ones didn't? Because then it could marginalize like some of the people that are trying to mine by themselves, that particular minority. So I was just concerned about like how do you differentiate if they used or not child labor when they're self-miners?
I don't know. And to make it even worse, what if, I'm the middle-aged guy in America saying, oh, we don't want any child labor and we're not going to use your mine anymore. Well, now I'm a bad guy because I just put a mine out of business. And what if some family says, hey, we were surviving in our country and culture doing it this way, and now I don't have any food on my table because of you and your regulations, valid point. But would that open it up into a bribery situation of maybe I'm the one that has this small mine and my kids are keeping it open because maybe I got injured, and now I have to sell it at a discount to an industrial mine who will then have it verified. So now I'm getting into illegal activity when before it was unethical in another person's mind, and now it's actually illegal that someone's taking advantage of me by buying my cobalt at a discount. So it gets super sticky. And who are certain cultures to say that what you do in your culture isn't okay? So you can also get into that one, which becomes an issue. I mean, my family, half Irish, half Italian, I mean, they always had the little kids in the barbershop, and that was okay. Now it's not. So again, it can get super sticky, but you bring up a good point. And how do you know? Once it's on the blockchain, you're fine. But how do you verify it? And I don't know the blockchain really solves that, which is why I brought up this case study. That is this thing really doing what it's supposed to do? Natasha, what do you think?
Yes, no, for me it's the same. It's just back to corruption. That's the biggest issue. Even with an industrial mine, let's say, okay, the D-Day, Garrett arrives, everything is fine. No child. The next day, the child are back. No, it's just a big issue of corruption. Absolutely, how to deal with that, and then different cultures, how to manage it. That's a big issue. And for me, just to raise a second point,
yes,
maybe we could think about the consumption behavior in the Western world as well. Do we really need to change, our phone and laptop every year?
Good points. Yeah, and are we being complicit in corruption by saying you have to be blockchain, and now I'm giving you an incentive to start doing bad things?
Yeah, absolutely. And just another thing, I think if I remember well, for this issue of Democratic Republic of Congo, there are actually some militias as well that are mining, and that's even a bigger issue because they're using, those mines to get money for their arms and their fights. How do you deal with that?
Good point. Great challenges. And fortunately, it's not my job to have the answers. But you bring up really good points. Like, I don't know that blockchain is solving any of this. If anything, are we just laundering it?
Yeah, or making a good conscience to the consumers. Oh, it's on the blockchain, so everything must be fine. I can keep on buying.
Yeah. When I was in the food business, we had the same issue with ethically sourced and all that stuff. And I always said, well, who's verifying the verifiers?
Yeah.
So I had a product that was certified vegan, and it was all done by fax. I called them up. I said, I could be a car mechanic. Like, you have no idea that I'm really making food. I faxed you my application with my $150, and I got my little V. Anyhow.
Exactly.
Gonzalo, what are you thinking? Thank you for that, Natasha.
For example, in my country, one of the mining activities, the most important activity in my country, and the problem is we do have two types of mining: industrial mining that follows the normally OECD procedures, and the domestic mining who encourage families, children. They normally tend to breach those minings that the industrial companies actually have sealed them by using explosive or any potential effects. And the thing about blockchain there, because minerals are set up by an international market about the prices, the mineral values, as they continue to be high, that will encourage them to follow the same procedures. And that's a problem of that. That cannot be avoided or regulated as long as the demand keeps increasing for the minerals, for the different products that you can produce from that.
Interesting. Thank you for that. So now that we've thrown so much chatter into this one, do you think, let's launch this poll, that is this a good blockchain project? Yes or no? And I'm going to keep it that ambiguous. Do you think this is a good blockchain project? I'll give you 15 seconds to vote. Five more seconds. Okay, we have a nice little mix here. So we've got we have 68% yes, 27% no, and 2 people have C. The 2 people that said C, would you be willing to raise your hand or go into the chat on what that meant? John Daly, can you just share with us what your C vote meant?
I just find it difficult to say with conviction either yes or no because it's absolutely so unknown. Like some of the instances that we've been talking about, the more we get into it, about how important transparency is. But it's also like so dangerous. It's like sets up the developed countries to have this sort of digital empirical look at what other places are doing and somehow having the virtue to decide that it's the best thing to do. I just not so sure if transparency in that sense is the best pathway towards even having the kind of arrogance that you know what the right thing to do is. So I have no idea whether it's good or bad at this point.
Arrogance is a good word. Who are we to say that they're doing a good thing or a bad thing? Maybe people are going to starve because their kids can't work the mine and they're being raised by their grandparents who can't. I do have a problem with this colonialist attitude that we know better about how other people behave in their home country and we don't even know about their culture. So yeah, I agree with John. Do we have enough information to even come up and say that this is the right thing to do? I don't know. I've never been to the Congo before. So I think having some healthy doubt about this is actually good. Natasha, you're next, and then Alexander.
Yes, I voted C as well because the problem is too complex to be solved by just blockchain. Blockchain can help in tracking the origin of the minerals, but as you say, it won't help understand the culture, help get food, on the table for those families and those kids. So it's a solution for a little issue in this bigger problem. We need a more holistic approach.
Natasha has a great point. We've made an assumption here that child labor is doing bad things to the child. We get these images of like whipping and slavery and da-da-da. I've been working since I was 6 years old. I mean, I was paid to mow the lawn and weed the garden, and I did learn the value of money. And then I went to my neighbors and I was shoveling snow when I was 12 years old. And I mean, I did it voluntarily. Now, my child labor experience is different than other people's, but for me, it helped me start my first business when I was 16 years old. So I've had a different experience with quote unquote child labor. So yeah, again, Natasha has a really good point that we don't really know all the facts to come in here and start creating rules in places that we don't really know that much about. So I agree. I think we need some more information here. Alexander, what are you thinking?
I believe that you see this with this discussion and applying blockchain here, you have the same problem as with all the other discussions about blockchain application. It's just a theoretical discussion. I think there are hundreds of different real life implications that are not being taken into consideration. And if we as a group here are already able to come up with possibilities to trick the blockchain system when it comes to cobalt. I'm pretty sure that the people actually working there on site will be able to come up with much better solutions of tricking the system.
Mm-hmm. And in the chat, Thorsten has a good point that my shoveling snow is not comparable with working in a cobalt mine, and I absolutely agree with you. I've never worked in a cobalt mine. So yeah, it gets super touchy. And then we have this point in here, kids die there every day. I don't know that, and that wasn't in the article. So again, if anyone knows if children are dying every day in a cobalt mine, then that's actually a really good point. But do we know that? That actually wasn't in the article that I read. So again, I'm not making any opinions here, but what I am saying is that a lot of these people are making assumptions, and I think we need more facts before we start coming up with things. I think it's nice that you say that we shouldn't do this, but again, it's people on the outside that are making these comments, as opposed to people within the Congo trying to take care of their own world. So what I don't like is the colonialism that I think becomes an issue in here. And Laura, what's on your mind?
I was going to build on what Thorsten is saying. Actually, for example, in Colombia, it's illegal for kids to work. But what they do is that they go to school and then they can work. So I know that maybe it's dangerous to work on mines or in another type of jobs. But at the end, the conditions in so many rural areas of Colombia, I will say they are so poor, or like the scarcity is so big that sometimes kids have to go and work because unless they will not have anything to eat. So even though like I know that Thurston is saying is dangerous, sometimes just conditions are different for like each country. So that's something that you have to have in mind, and that's why I think blockchain is not a solution for this case. There's a lot of ambiguity depending on each culture.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And so the last two on this subject, German and then Jose.
Well, yeah, as we all have said, that blockchain probably will not fix the entire problem, but probably will make a traceability of all the data we need to avoid this kind of corruption and to avoid these kind of things, you know. I think it's better to have some entity or some blockchain to try to stop these kind of things instead of letting them go as they want to go, you know. That's my opinion.
Thank you. And Jose.
Sorry. Yes, it is solely that I would like for, from a consumer perspective, I would like to know where the cobalt in this case come from and what are the process involved there. So although that I don't want to change the ways how the in this case Congo are doing their things, I would like to express my opinion, buying or not, or having the information about the cobalt and the condition of labor in this case.
Thank you. And Valentina.
Yeah, I think it would be kind of an easy solution, like just to clear up our, I guess, to a selfish way to feel less guilty of where we find cobalt, but we should consider many more things. It's much more complicated.
I think, Valentina, you really kind of hit it. The biggest reason that I asked IBM and RCS to be guests is because I want to ask the question of, are you using blockchain to make us feel like we're not using child labor, when in fact you're really not solving the problem at all, because blockchain isn't solving the issue before it gets onto the blockchain. So are you still going to have child labor in here, but give consumers the impression that we're not? And are you using blockchain just to make us feel less guilty? We'll see what they say. It's going to be recorded, so we'll see what happens. So let's move on to the next one. So now here are going to be some more quickie voting opportunities. This time we're just going to use yes or no in the participant box. So could everyone just press the yes button so that I know that you know where it is. So open up your mic if you don't know where it is. Go to the participants box and on the bottom left. Thank you, Alex, right next to the raised hand. Team 6 Dorian, if you could click yes. Oksana. Anna Chris. Alexander B, our guest. Great. Okay, enough people. All right, so we're just going to do some quickie polling here on industry uses. Click yes or no if you think blockchain is a good idea for quick payment processes. This is remittances, wiring money at home. And this is also going to be an easy way to get participation points by voting one way or the other. So just a yes or a no. And Valentina, can you see the tabulation? I don't think you can see the voting results just yet. Can you open up your mic, Valentina?
Yes.
Can you see the tabulation of the score?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to put it in the chat. It's quick payment is 41 yeses and 1 no. Okay. So that's an easy one. Now let's move to electronic voting. Yes, it's a good idea using blockchain. No, it's not.
Professor, would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. Electronic voting using blockchain. Good idea, yes. Bad idea, no. Okay, on that one we get 38 yeses and 6 nos. Okay.
Professor, can I say something right now? Because
Yeah,
I just saw that some U.S. citizens voted for no. I just want to know about it because most of us who are coming from Latin American countries, we said yes. So for me, it's kind of like impressive. I just want to know why.
For German, would you be willing to raise your hand if you voted no and let us know why? Marianne.
Yeah, I voted for no. If I had the option for like it depends or like maybe, I would have chosen that. I think blockchain for voting is great, especially with this past recent election and a lot of this whole like, oh, you have like illegal votes, blah blah blah. So like I think for that it's great. My only concern is because it's fully transparent. I would want to know who has access to the information. So is it like a public database or is it just going to be like the government who has it? Because if it is a public database, which I'm assuming it isn't, that's like my only concern. I think it can sort of cause a little bit of like civil unrest because some people wouldn't be okay having them knowing or everybody know who they voted for and stuff like that. So I think I would just need a little bit more information to actually fully vote for it. But I do think that it's going to get there and it can be a foundational technology for that. I would just more for like privacy reasons be a little concerned.
Okay, thank you. Charlie, what are you thinking?
It's more like the validation. I mean, that's a good point Miriam made about you don't want other people to know which way you vote. But then again, if someone steals my key or if it's like fingerprints or something, someone can pretend to be me and get their vote as me on the blockchain. It's not, sure, you can make it easy to count and once it's on the blockchain, it's great. But if it's not secure getting the vote onto the blockchain and verifying the person who's supposed to be voting is that person actually voting, then it's useless. Blockchain by itself, I don't see actually helping lots of situations by itself.
Thank you. Luis, what do you think?
Yes, I was thinking as well, like Herman, and I do see the points of transparency that Charlie and Mariam are saying, but I think it's a huge issue in South America, and like consider like right now the Venezuelan elections and everything. It's just, even though it's supposed to be anonymous, like through sectors, they know which sector voted or not for the current president re-elected. So it is kind of an like you are intimidated. Even like those people are voting for the current government, even though they don't like it. I wish we had someone from Venezuela here actually to let us know a little bit more about that. But it's if it is somehow controlled that it can be anonymous as well. That you know your privacy, like who you voted for, it's unknown, but the results are known. That it would be like in South America, there's a lot of corruption in the highest spheres. So I'm thinking it would just be a great solution to avoid corruption in those spheres.
Okay, thank you. So now again, we're getting into issues where in certain countries, it might work better than in other countries if you look at the current system. So some people say, hey, the United States would have really done better off with the blockchain or anything else than what we ever had. Or in South America, maybe it's better than the current system. Estonia is using it, but again, it's a smaller country, so it's going to be a little bit easier to handle, and people are more used to a lot of technology. So again, it can be regionalized. Charlie, what are you thinking?
I'm sorry, I'm just like reading all the comments coming in the chat room.
I like Alex's would create too much fake news because people don't understand blockchain. That was a point that a friend of mine brought up in China, where he's big on blockchain, he teaches coding, and he said, all you need is the losing person to throw doubt into the validity of the election. I think there's a point there. I think there's a real point. If people don't understand it, then someone saying it was hacked, it's like really easy just to throw that one out there. Lydia, what are you thinking?
I just wanted to ask Charlie, maybe if it will be the possibility to use, for example, face recognition, that will be a better solution to trust in this blockchain elections, because like Herman and Luis said, we have huge problems in South America with the elections, and I think for us will be a better solution. Of course, I don't know if the system will work there, but yeah, with our system right now, it's not good at all. So it's, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, so the biometrics as a way to like kind of store your key into the blockchain is a great idea, except for how do you make sure no one else can copy that? If it's just a face, like I've logged into my computer using my driver's license, so you have to have at least some sort of way to make it so someone can't pretend to be you. If someone looks similar enough, like family members have gotten into family members' accounts using face stuff, the biometrics is a great way to kind of secure your own information, but it's really important to make it so that no one else can copy that. Like I can make a mask, like granted, this is like, if I really wanted to, I could make a mask of the president and pretend to be him to get into his blockchain or something like that, right? There's a lot of investment involved, and it makes it a lot less likely for like mass attacks of stealing information. But if it's just still a point of vulnerability that doesn't solve an issue. And if someone gets an AI program that can do it on a mass scale, then blockchain as a whole kind of doesn't have the safety on the front end that it needs. So it's really just, there's a solution that needs to be implemented that like you need a lot of different factors, like 2-3-factor authentication methods or something. But I think we're figuring it out. We're figuring it out.
Thank you, Charlie. Fanny, what are you thinking?
I actually voted no first concerning your question, but now that I saw all the discussion that was going on, I would actually change my vote to yes, because so in some countries, you know that the vote is mandatory, right? But in other countries, it's not. And I was maybe thinking that maybe with blockchain, it would actually make it easier for people to actually vote and give their opinion, and we won't like make sure that we won't end up with like presidents, like I'm not going to say any name right now, but with presidents that we wouldn't want to be present. So maybe, yeah, I would change my vote to yes, actually. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. And Anna Catalina. Lydia. Final comment?
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't want to raise my hand. Sorry.
No worries. So now let's do a yes or no. Let's just kind of go a little bit, pop over here to another juicy topic. Medical record keeping, storing patient records on the blockchain where the patients are possessing the key to the records. So if the patients could possess the key to the records, as opposed to the doctors, would you like to have a blockchain for that? Yes or no? Okay, final tabs here. 37 yes, 3 no. So the three people that said no, would you be willing to raise your hand or put into the chat what your thought is? Alexander Schindler, hi.
Hi. Once again, I'm thinking if the scenario is this, that the individual people have the key to their records, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea. I think you can just not trust people to not lose their key, because if people are even losing the key to their house, what makes you think that they are not losing it to their medical records, right? So in the end, you might have a system where 30% of the population doesn't really have access to their health information, right? Simply because they are a little bit more chaotic. And this is something that would be super, super problematic, I think, for the whole system.
Very good point. Thank you for that. Anna Catalina, what do you think?
Sorry. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
But I think I might have to disagree with Alex, because then it's like today we need to base our assumptions in trusting in people. Like today, if you want to go to the doctor, you need to carry your health insurance card, or else you won't get the proper service. So it will be the same as having your own information and being able to control what exactly are you sharing with other doctors, and if there's something else that you need to add to enrich your experience or your, the treatment that you're going to receive. So I guess I will definitely say yes. That will give more power to the user to own its own information and be able to keep it updated as well.
Great, thank you. So let's move on to our next vote. Using blockchain for food safety, specifically to track bad food. Someone gets sick. Anna Catalina had a salad at a restaurant and she got ill off the romaine lettuce. Using blockchain to find out what farm actually did that so that we can stop that. Is blockchain a good use for food safety and tracking food in the supply chain? Five more seconds. Okay, so we have 41 yes and 4 no. So the no's, would someone be willing to raise their hand or put into the chat why you voted no? Mariam, hi.
Hi. Okay, so like I swear I'm not like a hater on blockchain because I know like I voted no on this and then I'm voting as well. But just because I have a little concerns. So again with the transparency thing, I think the objective is there and it's great. Yes, we need to be able to catch these like mass outbreaks of salmonella or E. coli like easily and fast in order to help people. For the transparency, once that information gets out, right now I know you can like find it like where it comes from, but it's not like broadly known. So I don't know if it would become broadly known to where it would actually affect these like individual farmers. Because say the farmer that had the outbreak is like a mom and pop farmer, and like I wouldn't want there to be a lot of negative backlash to where we essentially put this farmer out of his livelihood, out of his business. Yeah, so there's just like concerns that I just don't know yet. So sometimes my no's are like, oh, I don't know. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay, so you're willing, but you're being cautious.
Right. Yeah, I prefer to be cautious just because yes, blockchain technology is there, but again, there's still a lot of stuff that we need to work out with it. I think it's great for this to be a foundational technology for us to like change different industries and revolutionize it. I do think we just have to be careful where we do it, just for like backlash and stuff like that.
Miriam brings up a good point, and one of the industry's ways to deal with this is by taking baby steps, where the downside isn't that bad. So for example, a lot of companies that have stock voting, when you're voting for the board, they're using blockchain to vote on whether or not you want someone on a board. So the world will not fall apart if that gets hacked, but they can get the bugs out with it. So it is like real voting with strangers. Like I get these voting share opportunities from Vanguard. It's a way to get the bugs out. And if there is hacking, you know, the world won't fall apart because it's just electing someone on for a board seat. So there is some baby stepping going on. And Maria, what are you thinking on this?
So I was listening up to what Mariam was saying, and of course the backlash would be, well, it sounds terrible, but I guess it's as every tool that we are provided with today, we need to learn how to use it in a correct way. And it doesn't mean that because this could happen, that we couldn't use it in a positive way. Like for example, if we find out that it's like a mom and pop farm that are having like a salmonella outburst, we could maybe help them in the way they are using in the way they are doing their farming. Maybe it's lack of knowledge what led them to be in the situation. So I do think it could be positive if we use it like in a correct way, like most of the technologies and opportunities that we have today.
So Maria makes Miriam and Maria make a good point that yeah, you don't want to blackball people who were the cause of that infestation. Perhaps it's an opportunity to help them with compliance so that they don't do this again, because these farmers don't want to be hurting people. They don't want to get blackballed either. So perhaps there could be more of a industry friendly, hey, let us help you get better practices this way. By the way, class has 1 more minute to go. I'm going to have everyone else answered. The SurveyMonkey is in there for today's class. The participation was huge, 250 participation, so everyone did really well today. Germain, then Frederick, then Valencia, and then we'll close out class. Germain, go ahead. Let's move on to Frederick, and then we'll come back to Germain. Go ahead, Frederick.
Yeah, so going from what Maria said, we already have a similar system like this implemented in my country, where we track where everything comes from the farmers, and we also use that actively to sort of know where it has gone wrong, is there a potential outburst. And I think by implementing blockchains into this, it won't really make much difference into how at least our country already runs itself.
Okay, thank you, Frederick. And class is officially ended because I like to start on time and finish on time. So now I will be here for another half an hour for office hours. We can keep going with the hands that are up. I'll keep the recorder on. So next up is Valencia.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Okay. Yeah, there's just one concern I think about bioterrorism. So yeah, we have this transparency of the supply chain. It's good that we want to know how everything is being processed and what is going to where. But we got to be careful about that. Everybody does not have good intentions. And, you know, anyone who's upset or may want to create a case and scare off a culture of people, we got to think about the bioterrorism that may be a part of this whole thing about blockchain in the supply chains of food.
So like you drop a few bugs in someone's field that you don't like, you pull the alarm and...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Good point. Good point. Thank you. And then is that Stephanie? Team 3?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
I have a question that is actually related to what we discussed today, but I'm not really sure how to approach it yet. So we are discussing blockchain coming from like a good perspective, or to secure more data and has it as a beneficial system for the entire world, actually. I like to believe that is because we are good people. But if you look at governments that are corrupt, or at least like more than 51%, for example, if you could measure it, would be corrupt, and they would set up a blockchain system to strengthen their own ideas and actions and actually make it grow through blockchain by holding it more secret and developing more actions towards their thoughts and ideas. How would that work? Because then if it's set up by corrupt people, then the whole safety aspect or the beneficial aspect is actually lost, right?
You make a good point. I like to look at blockchain as if it's like a tombstone. You're just etching it in stone. People can etch in mistakes, or they can etch in bad things. So yeah, blockchain's just kind of like etching in stone. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily right or good. And I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And again, I don't have a good answer for
No, exactly. It's debatable. Like we discussed it with our team as well. But, okay.
German, would you like to be our final commentator for the class today?
Okay. Well, yes, we were talking about food, and when you talk about food, you talk about perishables. So yeah, my concern was all about people can be sued just because of that. So blockchain will hurt those producers or people who can like give food to anyone. That's my comment.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Well, everyone, great class, tons of participation. Everyone did really well. Thank you so much. You have the Survey Monkey. If anyone wants to copy the chat, just go into the participants box. On the bottom right, you'll see the more with a little down arrow. Just click Save Chat, and you can take a look at what everyone said. And the recorders